those of you who don't know me, I am currently an influencer on TikTok, and I make content that is based around like quantum mechanics, the laws of physics, universal law, which is basically spiritual law. I make a lot of spiritual content, scientific content, and content that is based around being a neurodivergent person, as I am highly sensitive to energy and I am a spectrum woman. And so I make a lot of content that is based around advocacy for people who have autism, ADHD, ADD, dyslexia, things like that. But I also make a lot of informational content that helps people to understand what neurodiversity consists of and what it is like being a neurodivergent person. So my content is very kind of drawn out. It has a lot of different aspects to it, a lot of different layers. But it's basically just about advocacy and scientific facts, spiritual facts, and just what it is like to be somebody who has spiritual gifts, what it's like to be a prophetic person in real time. I talk about what it is like to be anointed and basically the trials and tribulations that people like me go through. And so the goal of this podcast, both the podcast for the adults and for children, is just to kind of bring awareness to hypersensitivity and kind of walk people through like what it is like to be a person with hypersensitivity and kind of touch on things that a lot of people don't have knowledge of and basically share what it's like to walk the path of enlightenment as if you are a person that is highly sensitive, hypersensitive, you're a spectrum person, then you are also someone who is set to go through what is known as the spiritual awakening. And so this is me kind of sharing my knowledge and my journey and helping other people to explore themselves, explore their gifts, explore their processes, right? Because as you guys know, a lot of us who are on the spectrum and are highly sensitive to energy go through these deep spiritual processes. And a lot of times you don't know until you know, until you've kind of been fully awakened or partially awakened and opened up to your process. And so this is me basically giving back and helping people to explore their process and understanding it without having to go through the periods of ignorance that I had to go through before my soul was fully awakened and I understood the things that I was going through as a hypersensitive person. So a lot of people are wondering, what is this down the rabbit hole platform that I've been talking about? You guys see me on TikTok. I've been making a lot of content, and I know that this is a phrase that a lot of people utilize when they talk about conspiracy theories or theories in general. If they talk about anything scientific, spiritual, they always talk about how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I don't think a lot of people realize how deep the rabbit hole goes with a lot of different topics. But if you are somebody that's walking the path of enlightenment and you've gone through a spiritual awakening, then you know that the rabbit hole to most things goes really deep. And so I want to share just kind of how I came about with the name for the podcast. So basically, I am a very deep thinker. And if you are somebody that is highly intelligent, then overthinking is your portion, right? And so as I started going through my awakening process and my guides started to kind of help me along my enlightening process and help me to understand the depth of certain things that I had no knowledge of. And I don't want to say I had no knowledge of, but that I did not remember, because the spiritual awakening is not about knowing, it's about remembering what you know, right? Because I talk a lot about reincarnation and the process of reincarnation, and spiritual awakening is basically just the soul being tapped into, cracked open, and then you basically remember the things that you already know, right? Because a lot of us are old souls. The old soul has been here many times before. You have reincarnated over multiple timelines, and each time you have basically engaged as the healer, the spiritualist, right? Because a prophetic person is born prophetic on all timelines. So you just don't have an anointing and then reincarnation happens and you lose it. Your soul goes through amnesia, but once you remember, you tap into your anointing through the awakening process, right? Because there are sort of remnants or glimpses along the way, along your journey before you go through the awakening. But once you tap fully into your awakening process, you remember that you're anointed, you remember how your gifts work, and then you remember a lot of things that you have known on multiple timelines. If this is your first time seeing me, I'm Nedra The Seer, and this is Down the Rabbit Hole, where I take you down the ever-expanding pantheon known as my human brain. I am a genius in real time with an IQ of 200. I'm also a high-functioning autistic woman with Asperger's and ADHD, placing me in the category known as ADHD. So I want to kind of start off this first kind of debut on 1111 Portal, right? talking about the concept of why I have started these multiple channels on these multiple platforms and what is the goal of Down the Rabbit Hole and Down the Rabbit Hole Juniors, and what kind of content I will be posting on my Nedra The Seer. I am Nedra The Seer page. And so these will be 3 different pages where I will have 3 different podcast platforms or mini series where I will be talking about my journey, walking through the path of enlightenment and what the things I've gone through and sort of endured along my spiritual awakening, right? And how I have become this Kundalini genie in real time, but also just kind of talking about advocacy and awareness for spectrum people, right? People who are sensitive to energy, people who are categorized as autistic, if you're on the spectrum, whether it's high functioning, low functioning, which are not terms that a lot of people really like to recognize or utilize because they do feel that it's very offensive. Right, but you will hear me say that I'm high functioning because that's just how I categorize myself. But I know a lot of people don't like those terms. And so when I use them, it's not to offend anybody, right? But again, the spectrum is very broad, and where we all are along that spectrum differentiates, right? And even if we both are in the same space, no two autistic people or neurodivergent people are alike. And so a part of me starting this platform is just to bring awareness to what it is like to be neurodivergent, right? What it's like to be highly sensitive to energy, kind of sharing the deep spiritual processes that a lot of us go through, what it's like to have spiritual gifts, psychic gifts, also known as clair abilities, and what it is like to be an anointed person in real time. And I share a lot of information about chosen people. And I know a lot of people don't like this phrase because a lot of people feel that it holds like narcissistic components, right? Because in a sense, we are all chosen, right? But I think that the reason why I use the term is because I know a lot of people identify with it, but I talk a lot about what it means to be chosen, what it's like to be a starseed, an indigo child. All these terms kind of categorize this group of people who are part of God's remnant, right? People who are walking in anointing in real time, people who have prophetic gifts, people who are part of this new earth movement. And you will hear me speak about that a lot, and a lot of spiritualists on these platforms speak about new earth, and a lot of people don't know that new earth is basically just a concept of higher consciousness. People who are walking in higher consciousness, they have gone through spiritual awakenings and they are fully tapped into their anointing, right? They carry the mantle of God, they carry a mantle of purpose where they are supposed to aid others in this new awakening of 2025, right? And as we know, 2026 is about to be over, and there are sort of 3 waves of people that will emerge into this world that will be a big part of this movement, because the world is being split up right now into 2 realms: people who are walking in the realms of higher consciousness, and people who are walking in those lower dense realms of lower states of consciousness, right? But this also goes back to more so the people who are walking with God and the people who are walking more so in those Luciferian frequencies, right? Those devil frequencies, right? And so the point of this platform is to teach people about the spiritual components of life, the quantum components of life, how you are the creator of your own reality, because I talk a lot about that and a lot of people don't know that. And of course, in order for you to understand that and know that, you have to be in a certain realm of consciousness, right? Which consists of a higher state of consciousness. But a lot of times people will explore this and express it and kind of figure it out as they start to go through their awakening process. I will also share like signs and symptoms of people going through awakenings, what it's like to go through ego deaths, and this will all be on the adults platform. The children's platform will be a lot more kid friendly, and it will basically just be about teaching children about hypersensitivity, what it's like to be a hypersensitive person, the struggles you may go through in school, building friendships, getting your friends and family to understand you, ways that you can communicate your hypersensitivity to the people around you when you are feeling, boggled down with too much frequency because you are in an environment that's very loud and that's compacted with a lot of people. Ways that your hypersensitivity might show up in the physical form, right? When you get sick and nauseous and you have digestive issues and you're vomiting, or when you're having headaches, or when you just feel so plagued and overstimulated and you're tapping too much, you're shaking your leg, your stimming behaviors, right? And so the children's platform will be very kid friendly, and it will basically just be a platform to help children understand what it's like to have hypersensitivity, understand the ways that their gifts show up early that they might not understand understand what it's like to be set apart at a young age and how you can cultivate friendships, but how you can also cultivate friendships with neurotypical people. Because as a neurodivergent person, a lot of times we feel so set apart that we feel like it's impossible to make connections with neurotypical people just because they're so different from us. And a lot of times we find it that they find it hard to understand us. But this platform is going to teach children how to communicate and how to communicate with people that they are different and in the ways they're different, and how to build community at a young age, but also how to express themselves and get others to understand them so that they don't have to feel set apart.
Diagnosing neurodivergence can be complicated as no two cases look identical. The indicators in boys and girls vary, and due to girls' ability to adapt and mask it, can be a lot harder to identify in young women versus young men. Nedra, what was it like for you growing up? Do you think masking was something that helped you to stand out less?
Dr. Jigsaw, to be honest, I think that masking helped me to stand out a lot less. Prior to the friend that I met, that I was able to kind of learn how to mask around and learn how to kind of appear to be what people deem as normal. I think that I was very noticeable. I was very secluded, very to myself. A lot of the children that I did kind of communicate with were all like very nerdy, very like set apart like me. And I believe to this day that they were all neurodivergent. And I remember the friend that I met that kind of taught me how to mask unconsciously. I remember when she first approached me, her first comment was, "Why are you hanging with them?" And I think she kind of felt like they're nerdy, they're weird, like you shouldn't be around them. But I don't think she could see that like I was them all the way. It was just my outer aesthetic was a little bit more flamboyant, but neurodivergent women are very quirky. We are very trendy in terms of like the way we express ourselves in terms of our style. And so a lot of times people will deem us to be it girls when we are not even a part of like those circles, just because of the outer aesthetic. And women are naturally drawn to each other when, you know, you look nice and you dress nice. And a lot of times people don't realize that neurodivergent women like to express themselves creatively. They are very artistic. And a lot of times one of the ways that we do that is through our hair, through our nails, through our clothing, right? Because artistic expression is our niche market. So a lot of times what people deem to be like it girl behavior in terms of aesthetic is just us naturally creatively expressing ourselves. I do believe that masking kind of has like pros and cons. And the reason I will say that is that a lot of times when I was masking, people would deem me to be like bougie, stuck up, weird, standoffish, because they saw me in one light when I was masking. So when I didn't want to do things that were like traditional or like things that people my age should want to do, it would kind of throw people off and they would assume me to be something that I wasn't, because I didn't have the guts to just say like, hey, I don't want to go to the party. I'm sensitive to sound. The noise hurt my ears. My ears will ring. Or, you know, I'm very sensitive to energy. And anytime I'm in these large crowds of a lot of people, I feel a lot of energy. I'm channeling things that I don't want to channel. And I literally feel like I want to jump out of my own skin, right? And although that sounds like really like dramatic, that's really how it was and how it still is. And at that age, I didn't really understand this whole like sponge mechanism. At first, I used to kind of deem it as like, it was anxiety, but I didn't understand the core of the anxiety, right? Because I would go in spaces and if it's like one or two people, I could manage. But when it was like really large crowds, really noisy, really active, it was like my heart would just be like beating out of my chest. And a lot of times I would get really nauseous, because the thing about hypersensitivity is that when your hypersensitivity is triggered by you being in environments where you don't feel safe, you don't feel secure, and there's a lot of energy circulating, your hypersensitivity is something that has to do with spiritual components and energetic components. It's a quantum kind of situation, but it can show up as physical components, physical ailments. I have lost count of how many times as a child people thought I was faking when I would get sick to my stomach and I would actually be vomiting, because I had a lot of gut related issues, but those gut related issues could be sort of triggered through my hypersensitivity if I was aroused because there was too much energy in the room. Like I'm in large crowds. I remember every year right before school started, like that first week of school, like the first week to 2 weeks, sometimes even 3 weeks, I would be sick every single day. And that's because I was preparing myself to have to go and be in spaces where there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of children, a lot of like, weird behaviors, and just so many different things that I just could never really prepare for because it just was something I had to do. And I couldn't say, well, I really don't want to be in this environment because of A, B, and C, because I just didn't have that kind of knowing, and I just really didn't feel like I would be heard or understood, because a lot of times when I would get sick, I'd be told like, you're making yourself throw up, you're faking, oh, you just don't want to do this or that. And sometimes it would be that I didn't want to do something, but that's because I knew I was going to be in a space with like a lot of people, and I just hated it. And I understood that I was different, but I didn't understand the how or the. So, Dr. Jigsaw, I'm just kind of curious to know, have you ever had clients speak to you about hypersensitivity and expressing that overstimulation makes them literally sick to their stomach, like being around too much energy and absorbing it, making them sick? Has that ever come across your path in all your years of doing this kind of work? Have you ever heard anybody describe it in the way that I'm describing it right now?
Yes, many of my clients have described their experience as sensitive to energy, leading to physical sickness when they have absorbed too much energy. Many are unaware that being in an environment with intense emotional, social, or even electromagnetic energy can cause real physical symptoms. When an individual is sensitive to energy, overstimulation can lead to fatigue or exhaustion, headaches, nausea or dizziness, muscle tension, or digestive upset.
If this is your first time seeing me, I'm Nedra The Seer, and this is Down the Rabbit Hole, where I take you down the ever-expanding pantheon known as my human brain. I'm a genius in real time with an IQ of 200. I am also a high-functioning autistic woman with Asperger's and ADHD, placing me in the category known as ADHD. So I'm going to bring Tara the Turtle on and have her kind of give a little tea about my life and how I kind of went through my experience and how it's led me to this place where I not only am an advocate, right? And I'm kind of putting together a lot of different things like nonprofit organizations. I'm putting together support groups, an academy for gifted autistic people, spectrum people, or more so people who are neurodivergent. But I'd like her to just kind of come on and share my tea because she's the anchor woman and that's what she does. So I'm going to let Tara take over.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tara the Tea Spilling Turtle, and I will be your trusted anchor woman on Down the Rabbit Hole and Down the Rabbit Hole Juniors. Today's tea is going to be all about Nedra and what led her to start this podcast mini-series to help build awareness for individuals like herself. Like many gifted children, Nedra endured a lot of childhood trauma, which made her life as an individual who is sensitive to energy complicated. She started recognizing her behaviors, her physical processes, and her response to influxes of energy at a young age, and by the time she reached middle school, she was aware of her Asperger's. Although there were textbook indications that Nedra was neurodivergent, she didn't become 100% certain until she reached high school. You'd think her IQ, desire to isolate, elevated vocabulary, heightened creative capability, and stemming behaviors would have been huge red flags, but apparently not. Hey, that's no shade to anyone, but I'm just hinting that as adults we should try to do better. I mean, these kids can't diagnose themselves, but I guess technically she did. So I guess it all worked out for her, but imagine how many people never figure it out.
There is no reliable figure specifying how many people with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, go undiagnosed each year. However, some recent research points to very high proportions of older adults who remain undiagnosed. According to ChatGPT, for children, the prevalence in the U.S. is about 1 in 31, approximately 3.2%, among 8-year-olds. In the UK, a review found that about 89% of autistic adults aged 40 to 59 are estimated to be undiagnosed. For adults aged 60 plus, the same review estimated that around 97% remain undiagnosed, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. By the way, I'm Infinity, your friendly neighborhood stats calculator. When the math isn't mathing, I'll assist with providing reliable statistical data to support the content.
Thank you for that information, Infinity, but now it's time to get down to the moment I know everyone has been waiting for. And that's my introduction. Many of you may know me now that I'm pretty famous on TikTok, But for those of you who appear to be living under a rock, the name is Triad Narco, and I am the eldest of the Narco brothers. I will be leading the team due to my elevated importance and supernatural genius. It's only right. Besides, Nedra is constantly losing her keys and running late due to the time blindness her ADHD presents. We can't have someone like that leading the way, now can we?
Thank you for that egoic introduction, my dear, sweet, narcissistic twin. But I do believe I am the real man of the hour. Hello, everyone. My name is Velian Narco, and I'm your friendly neighborhood Machiavellian narc. I will be the lead in all things related to narcissism, energy vampires, and the dark empath, as those my dear friends are the realms I specialize in. I will discuss recognition patterns and how the dark empath differs from all other empaths. I will break down the effects of trauma and what trauma does to the nervous system. Unlike my brother, I will work as a vital part of the team to help Nedra spread awareness. After all, teamwork makes the dream work, and I have a few diabolical dreams of my own.
Hi everyone, my name is Empath, and like Nedra, I am also an individual who's sensitive to energy. I will help express what it is like to be gifted, psychic, and spiritually attuned to people, places, and energy. I will help explore topics such as spectrum behaviors, psychic gifts, spirituality, soul contracts, and the quantum mechanics of life. I'd like to thank you all for stopping by for our first episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. I may not be Alice, but I can take you on an adventure with the help of my wonderful friends. So until next time, stay grounded, grateful, and blessed.